All right, so if you were here for Sunday school, you saw just a small sliver of the hundreds and hundreds of photos that I took while we had the privilege of touring the Holy Land. And what I'd like to do today is show you some more photos, but try to make it more of an interaction with Scripture as we look at these photos during this time today. Before we start looking at photos of Jesus' early life and ministry, I'd like you to think with me for a moment about some of the most life-changing events that have happened to you. The most life-changing events that have happened to you. All right, you got one or two maybe in your mind. I mean, this may or may not count, but I would say your birth, our birth was probably the first life-changing event perhaps. When we entered the world, you could think of maybe the first day of school, meeting a best friend for life, graduating from high school maybe, learning how to drive, for some, vacation to Disney World, for others getting married, for others having their first child, and on down the line. You can think of life-changing experiences. One of the positive life-changing experiences or events that we could think of, though, and I would say this is the most important that we could think of, is what we choose to believe, what we choose for our faith. You could use the word religion, which isn't a completely wrong word to use, but it could be confusing. But for us believers, the time that we decided that we were empowered by the Holy Spirit to decide to reject our life of sinfulness and to accept the life of following, of being a disciple of Jesus Christ, where we recognized our sin and we recognized Jesus was the only one who could save us and redeem us from that sin, and we accepted Jesus' sacrifice, his death, burial, and resurrection for us. I would say that would be the most life-changing experience that we as believers, we'd have to put that at the top, right? But even though we may have experienced that most life-changing experience, that doesn't mean our life as believers has been smooth sailing, right? It's been difficult in many ways. We have physical trials all the time, it seems, but we also have spiritual trials. We can struggle with temptation. We can struggle with doubt, struggle with unbelief. I've struggled with all of those, and I'm sure you all could say the same. And sometimes our struggles are so deep that if we're honest, we don't even want to pray. We don't even want to read our Bibles. We don't even feel like communicating or fellowshipping with our God. And it's in those moments that we need spiritual renewal. You could use the word revival. There are many ways this can happen, right? There are many tools God can use to snap us back to attention in the need of a vibrant relationship with him. Sometimes it comes down to just a simple choice. God penetrates our still hard heart many times through his Spirit, and realize that we need to make a conscious decision to do something in our lives to get us back on track spiritually. We need to set aside certain distractions. We all are distracted with many things. And as I've said before, many things that are not bad, but the fact that we decide and choose to distract ourselves with them and spend so much time of the day or the week with them, that in itself is bad. Because we are not prioritizing our walk with God. Instead, we're filling our life with mediocre things rather than with the best thing. And we sometimes have to realize when that happens, and we have to set aside distractions, make sacrifices, enter God's presence to seek his face. This can be done anywhere and anytime, as we know. In your bedroom, while you're sitting in a car line, while you are trying to fall asleep. Maybe you just woke up and you're sitting with your open Bible in front of you. This can happen at any time. But let's be honest that there are some places and times that are better than others, right? For example, if you know that you need spiritual renewal, you're probably not going to go to a movie theater and sit down while a movie's playing and then try to read your Bible and pray while the movie's, right? Too many distractions. growing up, I went to camp a lot. That was a priority of my parents, was to send us to camp. And so we went to camp, and camp was good in some ways, but I'm just not a camp person, so I have a love-hate relationship with camps. But I will say one thing that it did is it got you out of your normal routine, your normal set of temptations and distractions, and it took you somewhere where your mind was more open and ready to receive the Word of God. Jesus did that, right? Or I'll say he tried to do that when he told his disciples, let's, as the King James, I believe, says, let's come apart to another location. And they would try to do that, and then the crowds would follow them, right? So we see that Jesus recognized the importance for him and for his disciples to get away from distractions so that you could have more focused time in your relationship with God. When I went to the land of Israel just recently, one of my thoughts about it was that it seemed a lot like camp. In fact, one of the places that we stayed, not far from Israel, and I'm going to show pictures of that at some point, hopefully. Name of the place, it used to be a communal living neighborhood called a kibbutz, but now I believe now it's called a moshav, which is, everyone has their own jobs, but it's kind of like a tight-knit neighborhood type thing. Well, it also is a camp environment. In many ways. Even the rooms that we stayed in were made out of wood panel, so it reminded you of being in a cabin. You got up in the morning, if you got up early, you felt like you were in the mountains. Maybe not as high as the Blue Ridge, if you're familiar with camping in that area, but you're in the mountains, and you got the mountain air and the chilliness in the air, at least the time that we went. So it reminded me of camp in many ways, and one of the reasons that I thought of that is because it got me away from Greenville. It got me away from my regular life, and it not just got me away, it put me in a place. There were lots of distractions, sure, because of the environment, but it put me in a place where I could actually be in spots where the Bible events played out. And even with a limited amount of time, I could pause and I could meditate, I could think, I could imagine, and worship God in those events like I never had the experience to do before. And when you go to the Holy Land, Lord willing, it's in the Lord's will for some of you, maybe not all of you, maybe all of you. It'd be great if you all could go. To go to the Holy Land where most of the Bible activity happened, where you can connect a real place to a biblical, real event where you can bring home to your soul by sensory experiences, seeing, visualizing, smelling, that's part of it, touching the trees and the ground and so forth, if that helps, bring to life what actually happened there 2 to maybe 4,000 years ago. So unfortunately, only a handful of us in this room have had the privilege of going. But I hope to show you some photos of Jesus' early life and ministry. I've taken so many photos, and I'm just going to have to center it to Jesus' early life and ministry. We're not even going to look at Jerusalem, unfortunately, this morning. So that hopefully looking at these photos can help you in your walk with God by strengthening your faith, realizing that, these events, it wasn't just, pieces of flannel graph on a flannel graph board. It wasn't just cartoon characters in a coloring book. This actually happened in a real place with real people that, by and large, were just like you and me. So I hope that this helps strengthen your faith, give you a greater appreciation for the events of Scripture, events of the gospel, give you a greater desire to read God's Word. You're like, oh, wow, let me reread that, which, that's important for me. Let me reread that story to see if that place, how that lines up, that picture that I saw lines up with the story. But even, aside from the opportunities for spiritual renewal, meditation, growth, maybe even get you praying about making a trip to Israel at some point as well. Praying and, to be very honest, saving money to go, because it is not your cheapest trip for sure. So as we look at some of these photos from various places, just again, be encouraged that the Bible is true. Amen. All right, anytime there has been you could call liberal critic, someone who wants to believe that the Bible, is we can believe lots of things about when it happened. It happened maybe 1,000 years later than the Bible actually said it did. This person actually never existed, but it made for a good spiritual story. People that believe that, every single time they start digging in the land of Israel and other places, they find something that shows that yet again, the Bible is right, the critics are wrong. So I hope this helps you to recognize that indeed your faith is real, and that also God calls you to deepen your relationship with him. So in the ministry, the early life ministry of Jesus, I can't think of a better place to start than Bethlehem. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. As we all know, the shepherds who saw Jesus were tending their sheep in Bethlehem. This is, again, a picture that is hard to see all the detail in. Thank you. That's helpful. And we are standing probably about 2 miles, is my guess. This is Bethlehem here. Right about, let's see if I can get my bearings. I think right around here at the pinnacle of this city structure, right around here, is what you call the Church of the Annunciation. I'm sorry, not the Annunciation. The church, when I'm thinking of the exact word, the church marking the spot where Jesus was born. We believe that happened right around here. So we are standing north of Bethlehem. You have Jerusalem. 5 miles south of Jerusalem is Bethlehem. So we are standing between Jerusalem and Bethlehem right here. And guess what all this is? These are recognized as shepherds' fields. So you can, in your mind's eye, you can imagine, all this city would not have been built up like it is today. You can see the hilly countryside. If you've seen, in your mind, you've thought of a shepherd in their pastures. You might have thought of, a nice flat level ground, maybe a little bit of hills, but not too crazy. No, there's a lot of hills in this area of the country. Some of them a lot steeper than this, where shepherds will take their sheep. And you can imagine nighttime, the shepherds are out here, and then just a blast of light coming, from, you can even see a few rays here that might help a little bit with the imagination. Shepherds seeing the angels, the angelic host, that happens occasionally. Sorry it happened now. And so they would have then gone, maybe down this valley, if they were over here, down this valley, up the hill, found their way to where Jesus was born, lying in a manger there, likely in a cave, which would have been the stable. And maybe a star, would have been up here at some point. In some fashion, definitely was there, but I'm not sure what it would have looked like, marking the spot of Jesus' birth. Bethlehem is not just important for Jesus' birth, but also, you remember Rachel, Jacob's favorite wife. Rachel and Leah were his wives. Well, Rachel died and was buried very close to where I'm standing here. There, and there are signs that say Ramat Rachel, which is where Rachel, she was giving birth to Benjamin, and in that labor, she died. And she was buried here. Let's see, I think I also have, think of the book of Ruth, the story of Naomi, Ruth and Boaz. Where did that happen? Bethlehem. And then think of King David, his early life. Where did he tend his flocks? Where did he grow up? Bethlehem. Glad we're back up over there. And so you can just sit here, and we had maybe 10 minutes at this spot, and a lot of the time we're all clamoring around trying to get the best angle, the best photo. There was a fence, an ugly fence right here, so I'm trying to stretch and so I don't get the fence in my picture, but still get a nice landscape, and a very cloudy day, but right at the moment I took this picture, the sun broke through so you can get some nice green on that pasture, and then all the other pictures are like a dull green. So I was like, wow, I'm very happy with this picture. So there you have, again, events where the place where these events really happened, and you can imagine how they would have happened. And the terrain, just walking. And, David, he eventually defeated Jerusalem, a Jebusite Canaanite city. He only lived 5 miles from it. He was very familiar with Jerusalem, I'm sure. He may have even had some contact with the Jebusites, or maybe he always had to skirt it, but he recognized that would be a good spot for him, and I'm sure that thinking, seeds of that thinking were established even as he's growing up, just 5 miles away from Jerusalem in Bethlehem. Let's move on to the next spot in Jesus' early life and ministry, Nazareth. We know that Jesus, even though he was born in Bethlehem Ephratah, and that's very important, Bethlehem Ephratah, because there's also another Bethlehem up north. So you have to distinguish between the two Bethlehems. So Bethlehem Ephratah was the key Bethlehem for sure. But Jesus, Joseph, his father, and so forth, they were from Nazareth. And so they eventually moved to Nazareth, back to Nazareth, you could say, and that's where Jesus grew up. And this here is a picture of what is believed to be what you call Mount Precipice. When you read the book of Luke, chapter 4, when Jesus went into the synagogue at Nazareth, and he read from Isaiah chapter 61, it wouldn't have been called that in his day because there were no chapter numbers or verse numbers. And then he dialogued, he talked about how Elijah was sent to a Canaanite woman to provide for her rather than a Jewish woman, and so forth. And he got the people of Nazareth so upset that they took him perhaps to the brow of this mountain to cast him down, but he passed right through them and escaped. If you look at this, some of this cliff area, I'm not sure how old this is. It may have been cut out for the road, because I took this picture while we were on the tour bus. So thankfully you can't tell that I took it through glass, I don't think. But the part you want to pay attention to is up here, because up here, unfortunately we didn't get to go up there and look down. That was one of my bucket list items I really wanted, and unfortunately the tour guides and so forth did not fit it in. But if you were up here and you look down, it's not a steep drop-off. It is simply kind of like a slope filled, and you can see it, with sharp rocks all over the place. So if this was the place where Jesus was carried or taken and almost thrown off, it wouldn't have been just a sheer fall off a cliff to his death. It would have been a rolling death, where you hit rock after rock after rock. And this was likely something that the people of Nazareth were familiar with. They probably executed people this way before. There's a theory that when Nathanael hears about Jesus from Nazareth, and he says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" There's a theory that maybe it's because the way of executing people might have been part of the bad reputation that Nazareth had. That's a theory. We don't know that for sure. But Nazareth did not have a good reputation for one reason or another. So this is where he grew up. This is, again, you might say an edge of the city here. And we're driving up. It's a very hilly, mountainous area right here. But interestingly, Nazareth is right on the edge of the valley of Armageddon. So Jesus, if you were up here, I think you look out and you see the valley right there, all in front of you. So Nazareth, all these places around here, it's all connected. It's not very far from each other, and you get different vantage points of different events. You could probably stand up here and say, this Old Testament event happened there, that one happened there, that one happened there, that one happened there, that one happened there. Bam. It's just incredible how close everything is. This is a view of that same precipice, but from a distance. So you can see right here is, again, you see how it's not a steep drop-off, but it would have been deadly nonetheless to be thrown off on there and you couldn't stop rolling. So we're standing right here. We're standing in a place called Nazareth Village. It's actually a special place that I don't know if it's owned by Messianic Jews, maybe. I have to get more background on that, but they try to recreate different aspects of what life would have been like in Nazareth at the time of Jesus. So they have a little section with some sheep. They have a kitchen, what a kitchen would have looked like. I'm going to move on to the next picture. They have, this is actually, I think, a legit tomb from maybe 2,000 years ago. You see how small this is, and I know it's hard to get the perspective, but probably that opening right there is about that big. All right, and then you have the stone that's rolled across that's about as big as that. Jesus' tomb would have likely been bigger because Jesus was buried in a tomb that was of a rich person. And in a rich person's tomb, you had more space. But this still gives you the idea of how they made these tombs. And similar to the type of tomb that Jesus was with. These type of tombs are all over the place in the land of Israel. It's very interesting. So this here is in Nazareth Village, the special place that designed for tourism and so forth, but where you can get an idea and actually see some of the things from 2,000 or so years ago of how they would have been. This here is another view from Nazareth Village. You see some of the the build-up. Nazareth is a very populated place. In the middle of that is this village that they've been able to keep kind of untouched. But you're surrounded by buildings. Here, this is the natural limestone, and you can't see it well, but I think it's right here, was a 2,000-year-old wine press, where there was the hole in the ground. You would throw the grapes in there, and then you barefoot would stomp on those grapes. And then there was another pool below this one that would collect the grape juice as it was stomped there, and then would be collected, put into the bags and so forth, properly fermented, and so forth. And so you see those lying around, Israel as well. It's like you go into your house, what do you have? You have a bathroom, you have a kitchen, you have a living room, you have a TV. Well, there, you had, your wine press, you had different place, you had your oil presses, you had, all these things that were just commonplace. You had your little oil lamps as well. This here, in Nazareth Village again, is, I believe, a grain press. And this stone would have been about this big, and you could picture how they would just attach a donkey to that, and the donkey, that's all they do, just go around in circles, just crushing that grain. You know that Samson was attached to one of those. It's not hard to push that. You could easily, Kobe could easily push this around, I would say, the circle. And not because you're weak, but because you're smaller than many of us. But you could still push that. And that piece of wood is probably wider than this pulpit. That was your handle that you would push this. So that was neat to see. And then here you have a man at his pottery station. He's making bowls. He's making cups. He's making pitchers, oil lamps. And his pottery wheel, he has a pottery wheel. And it's spinning. I'm like, how are you spinning that? You have electricity? And so I look under the table, and you've got your wheel, then you have a spindle running down into that, and then you have a big wheel that he puts his feet on, and he spins it with his feet. And that is likely how they made their pottery. This here is a recreation. I don't know if it was built on an actual synagogue site, but it's for sure a recreation of what a synagogue would have looked like. Again, Jesus preached in the synagogue at Nazareth. Might have been about this size. You can see the pillows here they have. I mean, people actually do sit in here and use the space. The roof is very interesting. It's a thatched roof. And first of all, you have your wood beams that you can see. On top of that, you have your straw type, grass type stuff, and they would have had layers of mud and sticks and straw to thatch their roofs. And so that should bring your mind to the miracle when Jesus was at Peter's mother-in-law's house, and the people wanted to get their lame friend to Jesus, so they climbed up on the roof, and they just tore into that roof, tore up all the mud, tore up all the grass, and likely the beams would not have been this close together, so they had more of a space to actually lower the man down through this roof. So through the synagogue, you actually get a visual of what the roofs would have been like at that time. And so it was neat. Even though we didn't see all the sights I wanted to see in Nazareth, we got to see this Nazareth village, which really gave you a good flavor. And you were in Nazareth, as well, for what life would have been like there. Moving on then to baptism. So 2,000 years ago, there was a bar and restaurant called On the River here by this baptismal site. Yardeni, or Yardenite, I should say, means Jordan. The Galilee baptismal site. So this is in Galilee. This is what it looks like. The river, just calm, beautiful, clean-ish. This is likely not where Jesus was baptized. This is likely not where John baptized people. But this is probably where Pastor Ben's mom got baptized, is my guess, because this is the most popular place to get baptized. It's also the easiest to access in Israel if you want to get baptized in the Jordan. And we had a couple people who came on the trip from other churches who decided to get baptized here. So you can buy your robe there in the shop. You can, buy your baptism. I'm not sure how much it costs or anything, but if you go to Israel, you can get baptized. Just bring your change of clothes, right there in the Jordan. So this is a pastor of the main church. It was part of our group from Huntsville, Alabama, there, and one of his congregants was getting baptized. Very precious girl named Emma. There, so got to see that. But where was Jesus likely baptized? Could have been at the same place or similar place where the Israelites crossed the Jordan River to go defeat Jericho, and also where when Elijah, went to be taken up into the whirlwind, he crossed. He slapped the Jordan with his garment. It parted. He and Elisha went across and then came back. Elisha came back. Where did that happen? Well, probably more likely at this location. This is very close to Jericho. It is, when you see that flag, the green logo of an ibex and some Hebrew words, that means a Jewish national park. So this is a natural park site, Israeli national park site. And this is what the Jordan probably looked like. Nice, muddy, brown, ugly. Now, at the time that the Israelites crossed the Jordan, it had well overflown its banks. I think it was about a mile or more wide at that point. This is almost a muddy stream. This is like the Reedy River right here. There's really nothing, it's not impressive at all, and it's very ugly. But yet, people were getting baptized here too. You could get baptized here. This is actually in the West Bank. Thankfully, I didn't realize we'd be able to, but we actually were able to go through checkpoints, drive into West Bank, different areas. That's largely Palestinian, but it's still controlled by Israel, but it's not technically, I guess, part of what's recognized as the country of Israel. But they call it, another word for the West Bank is Judea and Samaria. So much of the biblical events happened in this West Bank area. So I'm very happy we got to go in there and see. We didn't go to Jericho, though, because Jericho is completely controlled by Arabs. You could say Palestinians, and no Israeli citizen is allowed to go into Jericho. So our guides and hosts and so forth were Israeli, so that wasn't on the tour. But we saw some sights from the distance. This wasn't far from Jericho, so you can kind of get an idea of what the Jordan may have looked like at lower times during the Bible. Moving on to the next part of that I'd just like to talk about in Jesus' ministry was his temptation right before he began his ministry. Now, what are we looking at right here? This is a corner of the Temple Mount. Temple Mount is a huge platform. What you look at is the whole area is built by Herod the Great, so dates all the way back to Jesus' time. So we know without a shadow of doubt where the where the temple was and so forth. But some of the rebuild was built later, I think, by Muslims and so forth. However, it still has the same basic areas. So when Jesus was tempted, we know that his second temptation happened at the pinnacle of the temple. So the question is, what was the pinnacle? Most likely, it was one of two spots at the southern tip of the temple platform. So right here, we are looking at the southwestern pinnacle of the temple. Now you see green grass here, you see the ground here. The temple walls were probably twice as tall or something like that than what you see here. So it would have gone down probably a lot further, as I understand it. If you look here, you see this kind of blemish in the wall. There would have been an arch, currently called Robinson's Arch, that would have been a walkway stairway that would have come out and then I think curved or at a right angle. That would have been one of the entry points into the Temple Mount. There's also a stone that was found. There you can see, again, pinnacle, archway, remnants. You can see how broken everything is up down here. I may be off a little bit on how deep everything ran. Maybe some of it was at this level, others wasn't, but depends on what time period, again, you're talking about. But it's still very high. And so this was recovered, found. This actually was the cornerstone of that pinnacle. And it says, to the place, in Hebrew, you can't really see it well here, the etchings, but to the place of the trumpeting two. So this would have been a very common spot on the wall. And even though it probably wasn't the biggest drop-off, like the other side, there would have been many more crowds likely at this spot. So I think there's a good chance that this was the pinnacle of the temple, because it was, for Jesus to jump off there and for his angels to catch him, the whole reason I think that Satan was tempting him to do that is because people would watch and see him capitulate to Satan. And if you want the place, the pinnacle of the temple, where the most crowds would have been, probably would have been this location. So anyway, I wanted to share that so you get an idea of what it would have been like, what the pinnacle, a pinnacle of the temple would have been like for his temptation. I want to move on now to the ministry in Galilee. One of my wish list items was to get up early and get a nice sunrise over the Sea of Galilee. First night, got there too late because the sun had already risen to the point when I was like, well, still got some nice pictures, but I really wanted to get there as it was rising, or before it was rising, and then take pictures throughout. Second try, it was too foggy. Final try, final morning, I should say, in Galilee, I made it. And so this is a sunrise picture. I was on the shore here, but got some nice reeds. You see the water in there leading out actually to the sea, a little bit of sand out there, and then just beautiful, beautiful environment. I was, I think, the only one out there, maybe two other people. They were on another part, so I had the place to myself, and it was amazing. So this is the Sea of Galilee, and where we stayed is a place called Gennesaret. They actually called it Gennesaret, which is kind of like a renaming of it, but it's still the same place, still basically the same meaning of the word. And this was also called the Sea or Lake of Gennesaret at different points. And so this is a picture of a boat, like the boat that we got on to tour part of the Sea of Galilee and to have a neat experience there. So you can just see how calm it was. You can see the countryside in the background there, just the gentle rolling hills where Jesus walked and ministered and taught and preached there. Also, where we stayed, a hotel called Nof Gennesaret, is the place where they found, back in the 80s, they found a boat buried in the silt that dates back about 2,000 years. So it gives us an idea of what a boat that was used around that time, the dimensions and so forth. I don't think I included any photos of it here just for sake of time, but hopefully we'll be able to share that in a Sunday school or something. So Gennesaret, that's mentioned in the Bible. For example, Matthew 14:34 mentions that people throughout the region, when he landed here, people recognized him, and people from throughout the region, they went all over the place when they heard he was there. And they brought their sick, and Jesus healed them. And they also asked that they be able to touch the fringe of his garment and so be healed. So the Bible mentions this place. And by the way, that happened right after the feeding of the 5,000 and his walking on water as well, this general location. Next, I want to move to, this here's another picture of Gennesaret. This right here is the museum of that boat, that 2,000-year-old boat that they found there. And then you can see right here, this is the pier where these tourist boats that we were on, they always launch from. And then our hotel was kind of back behind these trees in this area there. So just an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful area, and it's great, again, getting up early when not many people are out, going at a time of the year when not many tourists are there, and then getting up early when not many people are out, and you can really have a nice time taking it all in. We were on the boat, and part of the experience was they threw some bread out in the water, and that, of course, attracted all these, I guess, seagulls. And they started just flying all around the boat. It was really a neat thing, and again gave you a sense of these birds might have been there at Jesus' time as well. They were out fishing, and birds would be flying by. This right here is a key landmark for getting your bearings in the Sea of Galilee. This is called Mount Arbel. I don't think it's ever explicitly mentioned in the Bible, but it would have been there nonetheless, and probably looks similar then to what it does now. Just a towering cliff right here, the highest point around the Sea of Galilee. We actually went up there and looked out, from up here on the Sea of Galilee and the surrounding countryside. In a moment, I believe I'm going to show you pictures we're running low on time, but I want to show you pictures of Magdala, where Mary Magdalene was from. And that village of Magdala, also referred to as Migdal, sat in between this ridge and that one over there. Not right on the shore, but a little bit further inland. Sermon on the Mount, this right here, you can see it from a distance. That's the church of the Beatitudes. They believe that it happened right there. You can see this would be a natural teaching amphitheater as well, also. So this is a traditional spot where Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount. This is another view from standing up where that church is, looking down at the Sea of Galilee, a view that perhaps Jesus and his disciples and so forth saw as Jesus was preaching. Capernaum. Capernaum is important because this was Jesus' base of ministry. This synagogue is newer right here, but it was built on an older synagogue foundation out of the basalt rock, the volcanic rock that's natural to the Galilee region. So there's a very high likelihood that Jesus was in this very location when he went to the synagogue at Capernaum. Just these lighter colored rocks would not have been here. This was a later construction. This here is a mile marker, an ancient Roman mile marker, which draws attention to the fact that Capernaum was on the key trade route there, called the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea. And that shows you that Israel was the bridge. It was a natural land bridge between the far east, I guess in your direction, the far east, Europe to the north, Africa, Egypt to the south. And so this mile marker shows that the Romans recognized this key road as the key passageway to get, say, from Egypt to Turkey, or Egypt to the region of Iran or Babylon or something like that. And so this draws attention to why did Jesus choose Capernaum as his base for ministry? Well, it was right on the highway. It was right there on the key highway. So he would have the opportunity to minister to people who were from all over the world. This is not a great picture, but this is a modern church. I think they call it the Spider Church, because its foundations are all on these legs of the spider, and underneath it is completely hollow. There's no columns underneath it. Right here you see the remains of ancient houses. And this brings to mind the scripture passage in John 14 when Jesus says, "In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you." So not mansions, not massive mansions, but rooms. So whenever a Jewish couple had a daughter and the daughter married, the daughter and the son would then move to that house. And guess what? They would have to add on a room or add on a couple more rooms. And so this here, you can see how there were houses and rooms were added onto it as the house grew. So we, as God's children, he is preparing a place for us. He's adding rooms onto his house, you could say, preparing a place for us. Underneath this spider church, a reason why it's hollow underneath is because that is the believed to be location, probably 99% sure, that's where Peter's mother-in-law's house was. That's where Jesus stayed when he was in Capernaum. That's where Peter stayed. That's where Jesus' mother-in-law was healed. That's where the thatched roof was torn apart and the lame man lowered down into, was under that church. So here you can see that early Christians recognized the spot, and so they started building churches. So you have all these churches, church after church after church, built a small church, then a bigger church built around the small church, an even bigger church built around those two churches. So based on all the archaeological evidence, and you have the spider church on top of it, you can then go up into the spider church, look down through the glass floor, and look down to the spot where it's very highly likely that Peter's mother-in-law's house was, which is the place where Jesus and Peter stayed. Moving on to Magdala, again, where Mary Magdalene was from. This is a synagogue uncovered that we are, I'd say, safe to say 100% sure that Jesus taught in this very spot. These stones are all original. This mosaic, original. Jesus was here, and he ministered here. You can see in the remains of Magdala as well their aqueduct system. So they had running water, lots of water. Here you have a ritual bath over here. So when you think of baptism, you think of those believers who believe baptism is done by sprinkling a child. Well, when you see all the ritual baths, you realize that no, baptism was probably you actually get down into the water. Right? There's so much evidence for that. And here, the main claim to fame from Magdala was its fish jerky making enterprise. How would they make fish jerky? They would get fish, obviously, from the sea, and they would dump it in these shallow, you can see the remains here, shallow pools, salt water, and the fish would just bake in the sun, just bake. You can imagine how smelly it was. And the name Magdala comes from the Hebrew word migdal. The word migdal means tower. You say, well, there's no tower here. Could have been referring to the tower of flies that were always buzzing above these fish jerky pools. This is where Mary Magdalene, woman who Jesus cast the 7 demons from, where she was from, place where Jesus ministered. Hippos and Kursi. So I always wanted to see the place where the pigs ran down the slope. This is close to there. That village is probably right here, the ancient site of Hippos. We weren't able to go over here, unfortunately. I wasn't able to see the tombs because they were on the other side of this hill right here, but Sea of Galilee. And then here we went to the place where it's believed to be the slope. It's hard to capture how steep and how far down this slope goes, but you can see the beach all the way down here. And another spot all the way down there, and then it comes up. So just neat to visualize that. And of course, we saw that at sunset, which that added a nice flavor to the picture and the color and so forth. Last place to tell you about before we bring it to a close, Caesarea Philippi. I'm going to turn to Matthew chapter 16. You can turn there as well if you'd like, and just read a few verses. What happened at what happened at Caesarea Philippi was recorded here in Matthew chapter 16, beginning at verse 13. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am." Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell," or Hades, "shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. Where did that happen? It likely happened in this area right here. This is a cave where at that time there would have been a spring, freshwater spring coming out. The spring is still there, but it's coming out below the cave now, and here you have all this fresh water, fresh spring water coming from this cave. Here you can see a very distinct rock-like structure. So when Jesus said, you are the rock, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, might have been looking right at this. Then he talked about the gates of hell, or the gates of Hades. This cave was not just a spring. This cave was a place of false god and even demon worship. People would take their newborn children and they would throw them alive into this cave as a sacrifice to false gods, because they believed that this cave was the gates of Hades. So when Jesus said, "The gates of hell will not prevail against you," he was likely looking at this whole spot right here. So if you look down, the cave is down here. These are all platforms and altars to different false gods. So when Jesus said, "The gates of Hades will not prevail against you," I believe what he was saying is any false gods, any demons behind those false gods that you can even think of, they will not prevail against you. I am Jesus, I am the Christ, I'm the Messiah, I'm nothing like these false gods. And these false gods, as you build the church, will not prevail against you. I think that's what Jesus was referring to. Again, here at this place of Caesarea, wicked place of Caesarea Philippi, Jesus redeemed it in a way. And he used it in a way to encourage the people of God rather than to be discouraged by all the horrible things that were happening here. This here shows you, it might be a little bit hard to see, but you can see here's the cave. In front of it, I think a temple to Zeus, the temple of Augustus. And then you have these other temples here. You have little niches, which you could sort of see here. There's a niche right above it, another little niche where they'd put idols. They'd put their idol statues. This whole place was covered with idols. And then you have all these other different pagan temples and a drawing of what it likely looked like at the time of false god worship. So Peter's confession should be our confession. I'm going to end with this. The foundation of the church, Peter and the apostles who confessed the true identity of Jesus. It wasn't just Peter. It wasn't just the confession. It was the confessing Peter, by extension the apostles, who were the foundation of the New Testament church, is what I believe. So the church was founded, and the church then has to continue. That's where we come in. We are not the foundation of the church, but just like Peter confessed that Jesus is the Messiah, we also, who continue to confess the true identity of Jesus, are continuing the church. That brings us to the mission of the church. We need to keep fighting. Not let the gates of hell, not let the religions of the world, not let the powers of Satan discourage us, but keep fighting despite the false teaching. Make disciples. Protect the church. And when we talk about faith that is fresh and real and alive, remember, just looking at taking all these pictures, all these events together, that the events of the Bible be encouraged, that they really happened in a real place, and that once you come in contact with the resurrected Christ and you see images like this, you read your Bible, whatever it is, that you have witnessed the transforming power of Christ in your life. I'd like to go ahead and close, again, just by saying it's not necessary to travel to the Holy Land to have an amazing relationship with God. Not necessary at all, but it helps. It helped me, it helped us, and I hope that if one day the Lord lays it on your heart, you have the opportunity to go and see these sites to strengthen your faith and your walk with God.